Is that the man himself over there?
It's me.
How you doing, Paulie?
So you ready to go?
I'm game.
Thanks for being on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Wipe this thing off.
Warren, thanks for coming on. How's your family? Is everybody safe?
Everybody's good. You know, we're all just like everybody else, just trying to figure it out day by day and thinking about what the future is going to bring. But we're making it all right.
You may have played the last big concert there was.
You know, that was quite incredible. A few days before that Madison Square Garden show, we were all starting to get the vibe that things were getting a little crazy.
Uh-huh.
But then the next day is when it really started kind of, everything started getting canceled. And, yeah, it was kind of the last hurrah, really.
I saw some film of it. I thought, Melissa, you're singing and Derek's playing and all of it. It sounded beautiful.
Thanks. It was a beautiful night. I'm so glad we were able to do it and that we were able to get in under the wire. Although in hindsight, you know, we might have been putting ourselves and other people at risk without knowing it at the time.
Yeah.
But it was a special night. I'll never forget it.
So I'm going to ask you some questions I don't think I've ever asked you, and maybe you have some for me. So you up for it?
Yeah.
All right. So how do you think of your sound in your head? I know that Carlos thinks of it as a saxophone for him. How do you think of your sound?
Well, I jokingly or half jokingly said one time when somebody asked me in an interview, what are you trying to get your guitar to sound like? I said, like Sonny Rollins' saxophone.
Yeah.
So that's a definite for me. As somebody who started singing before I started playing guitar, I was already kind of gravitating towards singers, and so the people whose voices I loved, that was kind of a marker for what a great tone was. Then when I started hearing guitar, you know, it's a similar kind of thing. The right amount of gravel, the right amount of body.
Yeah.
You still got to have some top end, you know, not too much mid-range. You know, it's the same thing with a voice or with a guitar sound. And I always tell people that one of the reasons we choose electric guitar is because you can make it your own sound. You know, when you play a middle C on a piano and I play a middle C on a piano, it's virtually the same sound.
Yeah.
But when we pick up an electric guitar, especially if we're able to turn the knobs and plug into an amplifier that's got a few different options, then the sky's the limit, you know. And I also always kind of felt like people like Bonnie Raitt and B.B. King, their voices and their guitar tone were kind of the same personality. And so I always wanted that. I remember Leslie West a long time ago saying something about, I'm a big guy with a big voice. My guitar has got to be a big sound, you know. And so all those things make sense to me.
So you don't know this, but one of the ways I learned how to play guitar is I learned every single vocal lick on Fire and Water on the guitar. I can sing every tune now because I learned them on the guitar. Oh, I Wept. Yeah. Do you remember all of them?
Yeah. I mean, that's a wonderful way to approach the instrument, really, yeah. Because the greatest singers are the greatest punctuators, you know, and how much of that has to do with the fact that a vocalist has to take a breath. An instrumentalist doesn't have to
take a breath.
Well, but it makes you kind of feel like they're cluing us in on what we're supposed to do. You know, like when you hear Aretha Franklin sing, where she pauses, that's where you're supposed to pause. You know, and Leslie, not to bring up Leslie twice within the same minute, but he said that when he did his first record with the Vagrants, I think, Felix Pappalardi told him, "Don't play anything you couldn't sing."
Really?
And that kind of changed his thought processing.
So a second question for you. Never asked you. If you weren't a musician, what would you be doing?
I would probably be some sort of writer. When I was a kid, all my teachers pushed me toward creative writing and journalism, and I always had a knack for that sort of thing. I wrote poetry before I started playing music, and so it was a natural thing. When I picked up guitar, poetry turned to song lyrics, and I never wrote another poem.
They are poems.
Well, yeah. Sometimes the bar is pretty low for rock and roll lyrics, but
All right, fair enough. All right, here's another one I've never asked you. What's your earliest memory of falling in love with the guitar? Picking it up. What was your earliest memory?
my oldest brother had an acoustic guitar, and I was more enamored with it than he was. And so that's why when I was 11, excuse me, and that's why for my 12th birthday, I got an electric guitar. As far as the sound inspiring me and wanting me to gravitate toward guitar, it's hard to say. It would probably have to be some sort of Motown soul music thing, yeah. Because that was all my earliest tastes were that.
Yeah. Are you playing music? What are you doing musically?
I'm writing a lot. And so far, I've been mostly writing songs on acoustic guitar. A lot of lyrics and a lot of just song structure type things. But I'm also working on a couple of instrumental pieces for the first time in a long time. One is very Zappa influenced, and one is very Charles Mingus influenced. So those are kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum for me, but somewhere in the middle is my norm, I guess.
Charles Mingus, that's a whole big rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, they all are though. When anytime you go down any of these rabbit holes, yeah, there's so much to discover. You could never discover it all. The only guitar teacher I ever had was a guy named Andy Hunter, and he was a great blues player in Asheville, where I grew up. And I'd already started playing before I started taking from him, and I was already starting to get pretty good. And so he really wound up encouraging me to teach myself, because he was self-taught, which is not a very good business model for him. But the one thing that I remember, well, many, but one that stands out, he said, if you only study the Three Kings, Freddie, BB, and Albert, you could spend a life studying that and still not learn it all.
He's right. Do you have any questions for me?
Well, I was going to ask you what your first concert was.
I went and saw the Thick as a Brick tour with Jethro Tull. And it was my first concert. And they were passing a joint around in the back of the car. And because you were an ass if you didn't, I did, but I didn't feel anything. But at that time, that was so dangerous, you'd have been thrown right in jail for 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
That was an interesting moment. But this one concert keeps coming up over and over again. I'll tell you the story. I went to the Warner Theater, which you know well, and I was showing guitars to Little Feat. And I walked up, and Paul Barrere knelt down. He says, Paul, that's a beautiful guitar. Because at the time, I wasn't allowed on the stage. I had to hold the guitar up in front of the stage at soundcheck, right? I snuck in. And the other guitar player, Lowell George, starts yelling at me. He goes, get away from me. And I looked at him, I said, what's wrong? What's wrong? He says, every guitar I've ever had that I loved has been stolen from me, and I'm going to love that thing. You get away from me. Which I thought was very sweet.
Yeah.
And Paul Barrere, bless his heart, knelt down in the front of the stage, took his stage pass off and gave it to me. And I put it on. This was right in the last 3 months, the last concert they did at the Warner Theater. And I was the only person there that had a stage pass. And I put my chin on the stage in front of the bass player and standing in front of everybody, which is nobody does unless there's a whole crowd. Remember, everybody's in their seats. I'm the only one. And I watched 5 geniuses go at it. Oh, Warren, it was one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen in my entire life. The staccato bass, Richie Hayward was a genius. They were all going at it.
Yeah. They were one of my favorite all-time bands. I never saw Lowell, but of course, you know, we did in '91. We did a whole tour with Little Feat and the Allman Brothers, and it was just such a highlight of my life. And I would go out and play with them every night. And I knew Richie well and loved him dearly, but he was one of my favorite drummers before I ever met him.
As a young man, he was a genius. I'm telling you, it was like another world.
Yeah.
And they recorded here at Blue Seas ITI Studios, Massenburg's place.
Yeah.
And I recently was able to get the first 2 parametrics out of a cardboard box that was sold out of that place. And now Ted Jensen has them in Nashville.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
At Sterling.
Yeah, it's Sterling.
Yeah.
So any other questions?
What was your favorite concert? Maybe that one, but.
Well, you're not going to like my answer, but I'm going to answer it. It's about 5 or 6 of them where I got such a hard hit, I lost my stuff. So one night, watching you guys, you started with Derek had just joined the band, and it was dead on, and I lost it because it sounded as good or better than the record. That was one, right? I saw the Little Feat thing. I've seen Eric Johnson on nights where he tears the hairs on your arm up. I saw Jeff Beck one night, the first night he was playing a Day in the Life, and at one point in the concert, somebody in the audience puts their fingers in their mouth and goes whoop whoop, and Jeff went whoop whoop on the guitar. He had perfect pitch. I mean, literally, you went whoop 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 whoop, and it was like everyone in the place knew they were standing in front of a genius.
Yeah. And
he played, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. I mean, he was playing at a level that was like the first night with Jennifer Batten, you know, and everybody was on the phone the next day after he played in Austin. David Grissom's on the phone. He played in New York. Everybody's on the phone because it was so magical what's going on. And I'm walking out of the place and somebody says to another guy, I didn't like the drummer. I almost hit him. I was like, he had to find a problem with magic. He had couldn't keep his mouth shut. I've been in Tipitinas at nights when the crowd moves like a wave of water back and forth and they lose their control of their bodies. I like that place.
Yeah, it's a magical place.
Yeah. So I've seen John McLaughlin play 2 notes after if everybody else played 100 and John just beat everybody with 2 notes. I mean, I like it when you're standing there and you're getting a hard hit and you know you're witnessing something that is not of this world. I was there the night Joni Mitchell recorded Miles of Isles.
Wow. I love that.
It was something. It was, we didn't know she was recording. It was something. Yeah. I saw the Blue Turtles tour with Sting, and they went into this drum bass at I think it was in 9 or something or 7, and the audience lost it. The audience lost control of their bodies. They started to undulate the whole place. Merriweather, you played a million times. Lost it. I've seen Carlos Santana get the whole place to sing. I've seen Neil play and have the whole place singing melodies. You know, I can't give you one, Warren. I can only give you. There's a night that Greg sang, I sat down and wrote you a long letter and the chills go right up your back.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
I caught you catching a Mike Stern show one night.
Yeah, that's why we're here. You know, I mean, that's why we do what we do, right? I tell you,
What's your favorite concert?
well, if I had to pick, you know, I grew up in Asheville. We didn't get as many choices, especially back then. Asheville's like the bohemian capital of the South now, but at that time, we didn't get all the major stuff. I had to drive to Atlanta to see Zappa when I was 18, 1978, and that was tremendous. And I had to drive to Greensboro to see Weather Report in '76 when I was 16.
Wow.
And those were probably the two heaviest things that I saw back then. Now, you brought up Jethro Tull. I was a big Jethro Tull fan, and they opened their tour in Asheville, and they rehearsed there in the arena, and we snuck in and watched them rehearse. And you know, that was quite a thrill. And then going to the show after the fact. But you know, I've seen in my adult life, I've seen tons of great shows, but the ones that hit you the hardest are when you're much more impressionable. Yeah. But you were talking about Carlos. You know, I went to see. We were in Japan with a day off, and Carlos was playing the Budokan, and I went to see him a night that Eric Clapton sat in and played a bunch with him that night. And we were back in the dressing room of the Budokan talking after the show, and we started talking about Afro Blue, the Mongo Santa Maria song Afro Blue, because at that time the newest Gov't Mule live record had a 30-minute version of Afro Blue on it. And Carlos told me this story about being in Africa in a stadium, and that was like an old traditional melody that on one side, I don't know if it was male, female, or just side to side, but one side would go ba-da-da-da, and the other side would go ba-da-doo. And that's that melody. And I'm getting chills thinking about it now. And I definitely did when he told me that. I was like, I'm glad I didn't live my life without knowing that story.
Now that you bring it up, I saw a band once called King Sunny 80.
Yeah.
And the audience lost it. The audience came unglued dancing. They literally went into some sort of trance with the drums, with the curved sticks, talking drums. I'd never seen anything. I didn't know who it was. I lost control. I mean, the whole place lost it. I like that kind of stuff. Carlos calls it the food you can't buy at the grocery store.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Warren, thanks for doing this. I'm at your service. If you need anything, let me know.
Let me show you something.
All right. Uh-oh. Is that the one I just sent you?
It sure
I thought
is.
it sounded good. How did it sound plugged in, Warren?
Sounds great.
Really?
It sounds great. It feels great. It's a beautiful instrument.
I sent that to you right before the Allman Brothers show.
Yeah. And at the time, the only thing I had to plug it into was this little practice amp here. And I'm like, well, give me a minute to plug it into something where I can crank it. You know?
All right. You're the best, Warren. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate
My pleasure. Great to see you. I hope to see you in person very soon.
My best to your family. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.